Prepare for trouble.
And make it double.
To protect the world from devastation.
To unite all duelists within our nation.
To denounce the evils of truth and love.
To extend our reach to the stars above.
Undead.
Weatherman.
Team 6K blast off at the speed of light.
Surrender now or prepare to fight.
Out, that's right.
What's up, guys? It's your Sniper King Weatherman.
And your Soul King Undead.
Back with another banger video, and today we're going to rank the top 10 best synchros in all of Duel Links.
For Weatherman and I, synchros are actually our favorite summoning mechanic. And can you blame us with these insane summoning animations?
Quick disclaimer for the list though, this is our personal opinion on what the best synchros in the game are, and while we are using real reasoning to decide what synchros go where on the list, at the end of the day, if you feel differently about the placement of some of the synchros on this list, that's totally
not our problem. It's our video, we do what we want. This list is gonna include both generic and non-generic synchros too, by the way, since so many non-generic synchros see so much more play than generic ones.
So without further ado, let's jump into it.
Our number 10 pick for the list might be a little bit controversial because the argument could be made, but this card actually has the best text box out of all the cards on this list, and that's Shooting Quasar Dragon. It can negate any effect and destroy that card, and it can attack twice with a ginormous 4K body. And if it dies, it floats into the really protective Shooting Star Dragon from the extra deck, which comes with a destruction negate and an attack negate. That's a hell of a lot for one card to do, but the fact of the matter is, you need to summon 3 synchros just to get this guy out in the first place, just for its negate to get baited out by a book or a chalice. The fact that it takes so much effort to get out means that people often don't even have the room to put Shooting Star Dragon in the extra deck for that floating effect either, so all of that effort and you aren't even getting all of the benefits out of it. When a deck focuses on summoning this turn 1, they pretty much use up all their resources, have no follow-up play, and get baited out by a single card anyway. It's a lot easier to summon this as an OTK piece in the Bond Synchro deck, but at that point it's been reduced from a mega boss monster to an OTK card, and while you'll probably be hard pressed to find a better OTK card, it's still an OTK card at the end of the day, not a mega boss anymore. Weatherman and I think that there are 9 synchros better than this, but at the same time we still recognize that this guy has to be within the top 10.
At number 9, we have Ruddy Rose. This is a level 10 generic synchro that on synchro summon banishes all cards from both players' graves. On top of the fact that if this was summoned using a Black Rose Dragon or a plant type synchro monster, you could destroy all of the cards on the field. When your opponent activates a card or effect to destroy a card or multiple cards on the field, you can negate it by tributing Ruddy Rose. Then you can special summon a Black Rose Dragon from your extra deck or your graveyard. This card is only so low on the list because though it does have good effects, it just isn't as useful outside of his archetype as it is within its archetype. Outside of playing it in Rose Dragon, it really can't deal with an established board, and activating the effect will harm your opponent's grave, but it'll also harm your grave to the same degree as it's going to harm theirs. And on top of all of those things, every other deck would just prefer to run something different to accomplish this same thing, which is why this is number 9 on the list.
Number 8 is Crystron Quarion Gandrex. That's a hell of a name, and this is a hell of a card. On summon, this guy targets monsters in the field and in the grave up to the amount of summoning materials he has and banishes them. With at least 2 tuners and 1 tuner as his summoning material, this guy's always going to be banishing 3 monsters, and the fact that he's both breaking the opponent's board and getting rid of any protection or follow-up that might be in their grave is also insane. When this guy hits the table, he goes thud, because really this amount of swing and board advantage is incredibly difficult for the majority of decks to come back from, especially in the late game. If you wanted to summon this on the opponent's turn in TGs or in any other deck that can pull off a quick effect synchro summon, this guy doesn't miss timing, unlike the Rose Dragons or the Trishulas. So you can summon this whenever you like and you are still going to be banishing 3. He doesn't stop there either. If he dies, he actually gets to summon a monster from either player's banish pile. So you could very well summon the opponent's boss monster that this guy banished earlier in the game. Screw the opponent over with their own cards. This card is clearly amazing. You know that his arrival to the field spells the end of the game. Even if you don't win the turn you summon it, it's very unlikely that your opponent can follow up from it. That said though, this card does have a couple of weaknesses that prevent it from being higher up on the list. Its removal effect can't remove back row like the Rose Dragons or the Trishas can, and it requires at least 2 tuners, which is a difficult thing to ask for in most decks.
At lucky number 7, we have Trishula Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier. When this card is synchro summoned, you can banish up to 3 cards your opponent controls. And if this synchro summon card in its owner possession is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can special summon Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier from your extra deck or your graveyard. Then its attack becomes 3,300. Then you can half the attack of any face-up monsters your opponent controls, also negate their effect. This is a very good removal in the game, and the fact that it floats into a big body that'll also negate all of your monsters, all of your opponent's monsters at the same time is kind of insane. This card for a lot of decks is a Quarion with an easier summoning condition, and the fact that this can be summoned on the opponent's turn using cards like Shooting Riser Dragon only solidifies our stance that it should be held higher than Quarion on the list, but I can say that Quarion's floating effect is a lot easier to activate, though it isn't nearly as good as Trishula's floating effect.
Everything I said about Quasar before, that he was potentially the best text box on this list, but he's too hard to summon, well, our number 6 pick, Stardust Warrior, might really be the perfect example of giving effects that really validate the effort you put into summoning something. Quasar takes 3 synchros to summon and has 1 interruption, a double attack, and a float, and Stardust Warrior has an interruption and a better float, but is that bonus 3rd synchro really validated by a bonus attack? Sounds pretty whack to me. I feel fine not having a bonus attack if I can still get an interruption and a float that's actually better than Quasar's float. Stardust Warrior can negate a special summon by sending itself to the grave until the end of the turn. I know that sending itself to the grave is opening up your field, but realistically you're going to be saying no to negating most of your opponent's special summons until they hit the summon that matters the most to them, and only negating that summon. That is generally going to be enough to completely screw them over. Not only has their best monster been invalidated, but if it was an extra deck monster, they can't resummon it from the grave, since extra deck monsters can't be resummoned unless they were properly summoned in the first place, and negating that proper summon means that they were never properly summoned. The decks that can summon this, since it doesn't require as much effort as something like Quasar, can often invest the rest of their cards into making more interruptive synchros. So your field likely won't be totally opened up. This guy still does more though. As I said, he floats better than Quasar. Well, how does that work? Well, Quasar has no choice but to float into Shooting Star Dragon. That's definitely cool. It can negate a destruction and an attack, but a lot of people don't even use destruction effects, and with 3,300 attack, it isn't likely they'll be able to attack anyway. But if Stardust Warrior dies, it can summon your choice of any warrior synchro. That's a synchro from the warrior archetype, by the way, not a synchro with the warrior monster type. So you technically have options for what you could float into depending on the situation, but the best option, generally speaking, is Jet Warrior, which on summon will target any card on the field and return it to the hand. So if they want to kill the Stardust Warrior, they have to do so carefully because they might have an important piece of their own board broken in the process. If the opponent had a card that you don't want them to attack with, the Jet will get rid of it, and if you don't want them to use one of their back row on your turn, the Jet could get rid of that. There's a lot of versatility that a Jet Warrior on the opponent's turn could provide, and all it costs is for your opponent to be careless enough to kill the synchro that, if they didn't kill it, would negate their best summon anyway. So they have to pick their poison, but either way, they are most likely getting poisoned. All that said though, it still does require 2 synchros to summon it. That can be a pretty big ask, even if your synchro spam deck can do it, so there are still 5 synchros that are better than this one.
At number 5 is a card I actually mentioned during number 7, which is the limited to 1 Shooting Riser Dragon. This card has not only made Rose Dragon a force to be reckoned with in the past, but it's also been a great addition to Odd Eyes and a couple other decks, to be honest. On Synchro Summon, it'll send a monster to grave from your deck with a lower level than it, which is 7. Then you'll reduce Shooting Riser Dragon by the level of the monster you send to grave, having a Foolish Burial effect, and a level modulation is already pretty nice, but it also lets you synchro summon on the opponent's turn using cards you control, which will usually be to go into Trishula Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier. The fact that this card not only gives more decks access to Trishula, but also grants the ability to use it as a disruption is why this card is higher on the list than Trishula itself.
Number 4 is Ursarctic Septentrion, and I know guys, only one deck can actually summon this, but its effects are so damn good it just has to be at this spot on the list. It's got 2 effects that can hurt the opponent in different ways. The main one is a continuous effect that says the effects of monsters without levels are negated. It seems like a lot of you didn't hear that shit the first time I said it. The effects of monsters without levels are negated. Alright, I guess some of you heard it this time, but somehow didn't understand. That's alright. Team 6K subs see a monster that completely hard counters Link's Andisk Seas when they see it, but it only hard counters monsters without levels that were summoned from the extra deck, so if they could just summon it, get it in the grave somehow, then resummon it, it'll be fine, right? Wrong. If the opponent special summons anything, like, I don't know, materials for an Xyz or a Link Summon for example, then this guy can search the whole archetype, which happens to include 3 hand traps that act as either Book of Moon, DD Crow, or Mystical Space Typhoon, meaning that even if you are a Link or Xyz deck that has a way to somehow play around this, you are still getting screwed out of it. And even if you aren't a Link or Xyz deck, this guy can search for whatever way needed to interrupt you. If you're another Synchro deck, he can search a Mega Tannis to flip down your materials, and if you're a Grave Reliant deck, he can search a Mega Billis to get rid of your most important card from the grave. No matter what deck you are playing, this guy has a way to screw you over. It's just that it's even worse for you if you commit the crime of simply being a Link or Xyz deck. When it comes to synchros that only a single deck could ever possibly summon, there aren't any better than this guy by far.
Now that we're in the top 3, I think we all know what cards are going to be here. It's just a matter of what order they're in. I could honestly make the argument that this card should be number 2 because not only the power of this card, but the sheer volume of decks that it's played in. Number 3 is played in Draco Slayer, Black Wings, Abyss Actor, Archfiends, Odd Eyes, Infernity, Resonators, and Rockets. I could probably go on for days. This card is none other than Void Ogre. Void Ogre lets you negate a spell or trap once per turn as long as you have no cards in your hand. Resonators are even able to summon 3 of these bad boys and set back row, which alone would make this Synchro top 5, even if no one else could play it. But other people can play it, and this is a very, very seen card, to be honest with you. It is very seen in the meta, and a new deck that sees it now outside of Resonators and the other decks that I mentioned is also Magic-y. So this is just a really insane card in the meta right now.
Void Ogre Dragon is pretty damn good, but you know it ain't limited to 1. That's because they're okay with you playing it with other limited cards. But our number 2 pick, Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, also known as Guts, is too damn good for us to be allowed to play it alongside other limited cards, and that's why they limit it to 1 on release. Not even with a ban list, but before the card even came out. When your opponent activates a monster effect, this guy banishes that monster. Your opponent can't do anything safely without fear of this guy getting rid of something they'd rather keep. While this guy doesn't negate anything, the versatility of this response being removal has shown itself in multiple decks because of his easy summoning condition. Also, the first time he destroys an effect monster by battle each turn, he permanently gains that monster's attack, and he can attack another monster that turn, making him really damn good at breaking boards and going in for damage. It can't be stressed enough how much power this guy gives you for it having the easiest summoning condition requirement you can get for a Synchro. We do have to address the elephant in the room though. This guy's interruption, even though banishing is great, it doesn't negate what it responds to. When comparing it with Void Ogre, that's alright, since Void Ogre's downside is pretty limiting and can give you some weakness during your draw phase, while Guts is always going to be good no matter how many cards are in your hand. But Guts not negating what it summons means that it can't be number 1 on this list. Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiend. We just have to bring this up at some point in the video. It's like Raigeki in your extra deck a lot of the time. Just being able to bring it up on a follow-up play, break their board and attack them directly. A lot of people play this and get a lot of dubs from it, but it is kind of unfortunate that since it is a board-breaking synchro, it can never really be the focus of a deck's game plan. Obviously, Resonators can go into it to search for a red rain, and that's amazing, but that's more the skill being awesome than this guy. Not that this guy isn't awesome, it's just that all the other synchros on the list have a much more guaranteed impact on the game, whereas this guy destroying the board is limited by the opponent's monsters having to be below a certain stat range, and the fact that it destroys means that it isn't as good against decks that can protect from destruction. But this guy is still him. He's generic, and he's an easy level to go into. Sometimes this is the perfect fit for your deck, but it isn't enough to be in the top 10.
Everything Undead said about Scarlet, High Speedroid, Kite Drake is all that, but way more. He isn't generic. Pretty much only Speedroids can go into him, but he doesn't just wipe monsters off the board. He wipes the board off the board. And if your opponent has destruction protection, he doesn't give a damn because instead of destroying, he can also negate instead. So your other effects will be able to work on their otherwise protected field. Oh, but he does more, you may be asking? If he dies, he searches a Speedroid. And you can go into this guy without normal summoning, so he can search a follow-up normal summon for you. And he's prismatic. All right, bro, this guy's damn near good enough to be on the top 10. Damn near, but not near enough.
Honestly, bro, Baxia was nearly on the list. For real, he was nearly on the list. He isn't generic, but when it comes to breaking boards, Baxia is that guy. If your deck can summon Baxia, you do summon Baxia, no matter what you have to cut for it. He spins the opponent's cards on summon based on the attributes of the materials used for him. What is he, a magic key? Most of the time, he's going to be spinning at least 2 cards. And the fact that he can also revive a level 4 or lower while also triggering some grave effects by destroying a card you control is also pretty insane. This guy is the whole package, but at the end of the day, there's only really 2 decks that can summon him right now, while everything else on the tier list is either summonable by multiple decks or just way more impactful than this guy. I know, more impactful than Baxia, but it's true. This guy isn't as good as the 10 on this list, but he's way too good not to mention.
At number 1, we have none other than Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. This is a monster negate that not only destroys what it negates, but it also gains attack equal to its original attack. Then if this card battles a level 5 or higher monster, it'll gain attack equal to the current attack of that monster during damage calculation only. So I could see the argument that this card can be lower simply because it does require a non-tuner synchro monster as material, which is not something that every deck can do. Not every synchro deck can summon a non-tuner synchro monster as a material for this card, so you could make the argument that Void Ogre should be higher than this. But just the pure power of this card, in my opinion, as well as Undead's opinion, we agreed to place it at number 1, but we also understand it being at somewhere else. With that being said, having a monster negate that does destroy and gain the attack of the monster destroyed during the turn is also nice, as well as it is a great OTK card due to this same reason. This card almost alone was able to make Speedroids a force to be reckoned with, but it is still a great card in the game, and that is why we placed it at number 1.
If you have your own ranking of what you think the top 10 synchros and Duel Links are,
then too bad. It isn't as good as ours no matter what it is, but leave it in the comments and maybe you can change our minds.
Be it guys, if you liked the video, then slap like now.
Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell to get notified every time we make a video.
I've been Undead.
I've been Weatherman. Team 6K out.
Hey, why they gotta hate on me? I done got me 250,000 views and they still saying they low key. They ain't wanna come work with the kid, but I'm flexing with Zay on beats. How they ask for a spot at the gym, but they leave all the weight on me. I don't ask them to wait on me. They would ask where they gon' be with a song if they wanted the Weatherman. I ain't asking to pay no fees. She was homeless and needed a spot. I ain't ask her to pay no lease. I ain't ask her to say no please. I ain't ask her to make no cheese. Scream fake, but it ain't on me. Got clean so it ain't no streets. Why green if it ain't no keeps? Brought cream so it ain't no beef. My team say it ain't no chief. My demon they hang on me. They seemingly ain't no peace. I seen him, he ain't no beast. For real.